For all our American fans, I am sad to say that the recently passed Inflation Reduction Act will not, in fact, do what it says on the tin. It will probably make inflation far worse, let's be perfectly honest. I always find it interesting that there is the tendency of legislators, when they're trying to pass new laws, to basically name them the equivalent of the Good Things Act, where everything that is good is held within this act, and if we pass it, only good things will happen. And if you don't go ahead and pass it with us, you are one of the people in favour of the bad things happening. It's a very childish and very manipulative way of doing it. But I'll go through exactly what is in the Inflation Reduction Act in a few minutes. First, I'll just draw your attention. I have recently done an interview with Angela McArdle, the sitting chair of the Libertarian Party US, which recently had a big shake-up where a bunch of the shall we say, cooked and blue-pilled libertarians got ousted in favour of the Libertarian Mises Caucus section, who have basically taken over the party and are much better about pretty much every issue imaginable.
When's the Hopper caucus taking over, though?
I don't know exactly.
That's
wish.
what we want to see, right?
That's what I would like to see. But plenty of people in the Mises Caucus are big Hopper guys, right, and including people like, I think Dave Smith's into Hopper and other such people. So it is a very interesting turn for them to take. And if you're looking to see about options outside of the typical two-party dichotomy that America and places like over here in the UK typically suggest, maybe check it out, see what she's got to say and see if it interests you. But moving on, so the Senate passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a completely partisan passing. As far as I can tell, no Republicans whatsoever voted in favour of this. Every Republican involved voted nay. All the Democrats voted yay, and it was an absolute tie. The yays were 50, the nays were 50, so Kamala Harris decided to give the tiebreaker and voted in the affirmative, so the bill has passed as amended. So, yes, a report by the Congressional Budget Office stated that the Inflation Reduction Act would not lower inflation in any meaningful way in the upcoming years, as Fox News reported. Of its $739 billion, I mean, to be fair, for the Democrats, reasonably, that's actually being rather conservative.
Well, yeah,
in comparison to some of the other bills they've been trying to pass recently. I think it was $3.5 trillion was the original Build Back Better plan.
Yeah.
When it was 2,000 pages long.
Yeah, it's just absurd. I mean, this is the final phase of empire where the elite start looting the treasury, frankly.
And that's what I can see here. Because of that $739 billion, $369 billion goes to climate change initiatives. You know, those things over in the UK and already in the US that have been helping so much with the cost of living already.
This is going to reduce inflation, guys.
Yep. Somehow, this will do something. Somehow, you'll be
just
richer.
Cranking that money printer going, yeah, the inflation's going to go down. What are you talking about?
Yep. And $64 billion in funding goes to the Affordable Care Act.
Not?
So Obamacare pushed out even more. Democrats claim the size of the bill's budget will be made up by a 15% corporate minimum tax. And I've got a bit more on that as we go on, because it is ridiculous that they think they can actually find the funding for this sort of stuff without just printing billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, to even get to the point where they'll be able to enforce the extra taxes, they're going to need to print billions of dollars to be able to afford it in the first place. So it cancels itself out. But as far as I can tell, as always, the plan, it seems to be to tax corporations and redistribute their wealth to presumably special interest groups that support the party and people who are political lobbyists.
Well, they already said it's climate change initiatives. So it's going to be special interest groups who support the Democrats.
And also $350 billion for climate change, and the fact that it's just voted entirely for by Democrats just is another blatant example of how partisan this is. This is not to actually reduce inflation. This is not to help people who are in financial trouble right now. This is to make sure they can slip all of their agenda through the door. Yeah, and they're not even doing it particularly, they're not even doing it subtly. They gave it a nice name, the Good Things name, but they didn't actually do anything else.
The Sunshine and Rainbows Act. It's going to bring... But I mean, Americans have got to understand that your republic is actually over at this point, right? When you get this level of partisan division, like, this isn't a republic anymore. This is two warring factions that have to occupy the same space.
Yeah, and
this is what they're doing to you.
And the thing is, the massive spending package raises taxes for everyone except those making between $10,000 to $30,000 per year, which is basically, with inflation as it is right now, going to be a completely irrelevant bracket as everybody's wages get raised past that just so they can afford to get bread and eggs.
Yeah. And Biden, of course, did say that, if you're earning less than $400,000 a year, you won't get taxed. Well, there we go.
Well, that was a lie.
Yeah, obviously it was a lie.
Yeah, and Moody's Analytics chief economist Mark Zandi noted that the bill would only marginally reduce the consumer price index, which is not the only measure of inflation.
No.
It's all that money that keeps getting printed that might actually be the inflation here, which is an economic gauge on the price consumers pay for goods and services, and even that slim savings won't be seen until the later half of the decade, by which point they'll have just inflated more and made any of those slim savings completely null and void in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's pointless, and none of this gets to the heart of inflation, because the government, shockingly enough, hold your surprise here, doesn't want to admit that it's government that causes inflation.
Really?
By printing trillions of dollars, such as they did over the course of COVID, and then locking down the country, such as they did over the course of COVID.
It's not something to do with that old archaic concept of supply and demand, is it?
Well, no. The thing is, supply and demand, very important. Very, very important. Supply and command graph, right there, very important. You can't live without it. Doesn't apply to money, though.
Does it not?
No. So, shockingly enough, we found it. I asked the shaman.
Right, okay.
He divined from the stars that, of course... Well, actually, I asked
because the same
Joe
number
Biden.
of goods is going to be available, but the amount of money to buy those goods is going to have, tripled or whatever.
Yeah,
and the shaman was just like, don't worry about it, bro.
Don't worry about it, bro. Here, do you want $50? Here you go, $50 right here. There you go. Where did this come from? I don't know. Just there you go. And, this has become such a big thing that people like the ever-insufferable John Oliver have been commenting on it. John Oliver had a segment on his show Last Week Tonight recently where he was explaining...
John Oliver went and told bold-faced lies to a few million people.
Yes,
right?
explaining inflation, which, if social media companies and the like are so eager to censor misinformation, I've got one to submit for you. If you just go to the next article, Rolling Stone reported on it, and I won't use anything from the article because it's basically just a fluff piece going, isn't it so good that he wanted you to understand? We all now really understand inflation. What I actually did to look into this was watched, I mentioned him earlier, Dave Smith, who's a man who, shockingly enough, understands economics, talk about this whole thing, and he went through some clips of it. And John Oliver, to be fair, does point out a few things like supply chain issues, that it's kind of bypass and the fault can fall on it, even though he then goes on to say, right-wingers are all complaining that it's the government printing money, like that has much to do with it. Even though it does. But the mainstream just desperately do not want to address that government intervention and deficit spending, which is when you spend more than you raise in tax revenue, causes these problems because you just print money out of nowhere. He even goes as far at the end to suggest that the way to solve this is to give the Fed more power. Give the Federal Reserve more power.
Where does he think inflation comes from if it's not the government increasing the amount of money in the system?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. This is the kind of normie interpretation of what inflation is, which is just the CPI index. And they don't want to acknowledge that, because Democrats and leftists, their go-to solution for everything is government intervention. So if we admit government intervention causes some major bloody problems, then it kind of destroys our whole argument.
But where's he claiming the inflation is coming from?
Well, he's saying he's doing the kind of centrist thing of like, don't you understand? Yeah, money printing might have something to do with it, but it's multiple factors. I can see the big picture. It's like, the big picture might have factors that are relevant, but there was Dave Smith explained it quite well, which is he used an analogy, a term that Michael Malice uses, which is factual but not truthful.
Yes. Yeah.
Factually, you may be right, but you're not being honest about the facts. And Dave Smith used a great analogy, which is that say, I'll use this on you, Carl. Say I'm in a really bad mood with you one day, and I get a sledgehammer, and for no reason, just smack you in the back of the leg. On your hamstrings. For whatever reason, you don't fire me. You just go about your day as you do. And then a few days later, you come to me and you go, Harry, my leg really hurts after the other day. And I just say to you, well, it might have been something to do with me hitting you with the sledgehammer, yes, but you have been walking on it since then. And also, when you consider it, gravity makes everything hurt eventually, so that might have had something to do with it as well. And it's like, yeah, that all might be true tangentially, but you're missing the obvious causal factor that's led to your leg hurting in the first place. It's a constant pressure that puts some on the money supply, just printing more of it, and to ignore it and just brush it aside and say, oh, there's multiple factors, ignores the problem. And speaking of which, when you're talking about whether it's actually going to solve inflation or not, even people like Bernie Sanders, shockingly enough, seems to understand economics enough to know that this will not that this will not reduce inflation. But then he just went on to say he wanted it bigger anyway.
Yeah, but Bernie Sanders has been to enough communist countries to know that printing money isn't the end of your money problems.
No, but he still wants you to spend more. So,
it's commie.
What he said was, let me take a moment to say a few words about the so-called Inflation Reduction Act that we are debating this evening. And I say so-called, by the way, because according to the CBO and other economic organisations that have studied this bill, it will in fact have a minimal impact on inflation. The White House then denied this claim on Friday when the press secretary, that new woman, Jean-Pierre...
The diversity hire. Yeah.
Yes, diversity hire, said, was asked, could you address the CBO analysis on this? And she said, leading economists have said that this Inflation Reduction Act that's been analysed by them, that's been looked at by these economists, will indeed reduce inflation. So she just gave the nuh-uh answer.
Yeah. Name those leading economists.
Well, it won't actually reduce inflation. Nuh-uh. That's essentially the response. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are plenty of, Paul Krugmans out there who are more than happy to say, actually, this won't reduce inflation, while he's already preparing his next opinion piece for the New York Times, why I was wrong about inflation again.
Oh, God.
Probably. But mainstream economists are completely less than useless. They are paid for... shills who are just more than happy to give the government any sort of expertise go-ahead on whatever it is that they were planning on doing anyway. Don't listen to mainstream economists.
I'm wondering if it's not just intentional, though. Like, do these people know? I mean, they must know. Like, they must know that this is going to have a negative impact, just printing loads of money. They must know.
Yes, but if enough of that printed money is immediately funneled into their bank account, they might be able to live with themselves.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema were holdouts on the Inflation Reduction Act until only recently, citing various concerns such as the size of the bill and how much it would spend. On July 27th, Manchin announced his support, as did Sinema on August 4th. According to The Hill, Sanders' complaint differs from Manchin and Sinema that the 755-page bill isn't big enough. This legislation does not address the reality that we have more income and wealth inequality today than at any time in the last 100 years. I wonder if government handing out political favours.
No. I can see where Bernie Sanders is coming from. You've got to understand, Harry, this is 4D chess from Bernie Sanders. Like, you're right. At the moment, there is wealth inequality. Some people are poor, other people are rich, because money itself has value, Harry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's the problem. But if we reduce the value of money to zero, inequality disappears.
This is one way of getting to the moneyless society.
Everyone becomes as rich as Elon Musk because wealth means nothing.
I thought you were going with the Sanders was saying, yes, we've got more income and wealth inequality today than ever before, and it's still not enough. We need even more inequality.
No. He's got his head screwed on right, Bernie. He's a proper commie. He knows that to get to the moneyless society, money has to be worth nothing.
Well, we do need to punish the billionaires after all. Not the millionaires anymore, just the billionaires.
Oh, yeah.
And he says this bill does nothing to address the systemic dysfunctionality of the American healthcare system. And it also doesn't address affordable housing, and that it doesn't give Medicare enough power. Basically, it just doesn't do all the things that I desperately so wish it would do. And it's spending almost, well over $500 billion, $730 billion. Still not enough. Typical socialists thinking we can just spend our way into prosperity.
Why doesn't the government just come down from heaven and divinely ordain the problem is over? I don't understand either, Bernie.
I don't either. It's a mystery of the world. And the GOP, the Republicans, have, of course, been blasting this, and rightly so, thank God. They've been warning that Democrats will pay the price of their inflation bill in November when the midterms are coming along. I can only hope so. Republicans also blasted Biden's administration for passing it, and they said the Inflation Reduction Act is an economic assault on the middle class, which it is, because it's inflation, as always, is a stealth tax that will hit the middle class first. If anything, as opposed to what Sanders is trying to suggest.
I mean, it's
it
already
will
grinding,
expand inequality.
It's already grinding the working class into the dirt. It's like, yeah, well, a pint of milk cost you $1. Well, now it costs $2. Good luck. But it's just everyone. Everyone is getting it from this.
Yeah, and Senator Marsha Blackburn slammed the Democrats for passing the bill which increases taxes and decreases energy production ahead of what analysts say is an inevitable recession. We're in a recession right now.
We've redefined that, Harry.
Oh, sorry. It's just that the government desperately doesn't want people to. This is in the next article, by the way, John. Thank you. And the spending spree also includes $80 billion to double the number of IRS agents, practically giving every American a personalized tax auditor. We should be cutting taxes, not increasing them. Not just increasing them.
$80 billion to expand the people who tax you. Oh, that's just so great.
Yeah, they say we should be cutting taxes, not increasing them. And it's not just increasing them, it's actively making it more difficult for anybody to maybe legally or otherwise get around taxes. So you're basically going to be under constant surveillance, as if you're not already, by the IRS in America, to make sure that you don't spend a stray $5, because Nancy Pelosi really wants to know where you got that $60 from.
It would literally be more profitable to the American people to take that $80 billion out into the middle of the town from the taxes of everyone, and just burn it.
Well, that would probably help with inflation.
Yeah, I know.
For what?
That would actually be good. Yeah, just tax everyone $80 billion and burn it. At least then you wouldn't have a massively inflated government apparatus that was going to start intricately taking, a detailed look at every single little part of your life.
Oh, well, the funny thing is that they're also hoping to use this bill to reduce the deficit by about $300 billion, which,
who cares?
Which is kind of a drop in the water when you consider the deficit is currently $28 trillion.
Yeah,
so
who cares? It's never getting paid back.
What difference is that going to make? A visibly emotional Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer took the Senate floor to thank everybody from congressional staffers to the Capitol cafeteria workers for aiding the effort, telling them, "You'll tell your grandchildren we're here." You were here. So yeah, in the ashes of civilization,
it's like an economic 9/11. You see,
yes,
you'll tell your grandchildren where you were on this day when the Democrats decided to liquidate the economy.
Yeah, and earlier on the Sunday, Republicans had successfully forced Democrats to remove a provision in their package that would have capped the price of insulin for all Americans at just $35. So literally everything in this bill is just to push agendas, just constantly everything that they will. We want cheaper this, cheaper that, cheaper this, cheaper that, without realising, hold up, won't this cause shortages of some form, which we've seen constantly.
Of all the things to do as well, that's the thing that seems evil. Like, yeah, well, we can't have a cap on insulin. Yeah, that sounds terrible. It's like, no one cares about that. Yep. Who cares about that at all?
But if we want to take a look a little bit at what is inside the bill, so the things that they're going for primarily, cheaper drug prescriptions, typical Democrat talking point, affordable healthcare coverage extension, pretty typical Democrats again, and tax rebates and credits for energy and climate change. And the big amount of money, that 369-ish billion for climate productions, it doesn't seem you've got the link, so I'll just read it from my document that I've got here. So they're trying to, for the climate stuff, they're trying to manufacture clean energy products. They are planning on using $20 billion to cut emissions from the agriculture sector and $3 billion
too many cow farts. Right.
Too many cow farts. Very interesting that Bill Gates has been buying up all that farmland. But anyway, $3 billion to reduce air pollution at ports. So, all of those issues with getting boats into California and LA, we're going to see even more of those. Research and development, $27 billion clean energy technology accelerated to support deployment of technologies that curb emissions, and $2 billion for breakthrough energy research. I mean, honestly, this all just sounds like fantasy.
Yeah, to me. This is them. They're going to waste all of this money.
We're just going to spend all this money on things that probably don't even really exist yet to hopefully, potentially curb emissions by 2030, which we hope will help improve the world somehow.
This is going to hurt so many people.
Yeah. Support for states, including $30 billion in grant and loan programs for states and electric utilities to advance the clean energy transition. Once again, electric is coal power. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. I don't understand why.
Unless you're in France when it's nuclear power.
Oh, that's true. But of course, nuclear power is not mentioned. This is just a stealth way of trying to pass the Green New Deal.
Yes.
After it was initially thrown aside.
Just bit by bit.
Just put put enough of it in each of these individual bills that's going to pass, because we've got partisan support on this, and we will get the agenda in there eventually.
If there's a single Republican left in America who doesn't realize that everything the Democrats do is in bad faith, well, this has got to be the wake-up call, right?
And here's another interesting part. For individuals, a $7,005 tax credit to buy new electric vehicles and a $4,000 credit for buying a used one.
Sorry, how much? $7,500? They cost $50,000.
Yes, they cost $50,000. But now it is official that let them buy Teslas is actually part of the Democrat Party line. That's what this is. Let them buy Teslas. Here's pennies so you can afford
It's only
one.
$42,500 now, guys. It's only. Brilliant.
Yeah, and interestingly enough as well...
As if that's not going to go up because of the inflation.
Well, yeah, because one of the yeah, that's a good point. But one of the things as well is that they are trying to basically ban all cars, all gas and diesel cars, by 2030 anyway, both in the UK and the US.
This is the WEF agenda.
And our very own New Connor has an article in C3 News Mag from a few months ago talking about this, just pointing out that banning combustion engines won't actually make there more electric vehicles. They won't just poof them into existence out of nowhere. Where he says,
I can't believe it.
In 2021, US had 280 million registered vehicles. 91% of Americans drive to work in personal vehicles. Everybody in Europe says that, big cities can subsist on private transport, but in America, lots of states are quite rural and are only navigable by car. Though Biden would like electric vehicles to be 50% of all car sales by 2030, electric cars comprise only 4% of annual sales, and like you said, they're $47,000 minimum, so they will go up and beyond that. And then we've got record level inflationary pressure and the administration's unprecedented $120 billion in monthly quantitative easing, making upgrading to electric vehicles unaffordable at this time. And I think Connor's putting it quite likely there, because it is just a pipe dream, a fantasy. It's ridiculous. And then the next one was just pointing out that, actually closing tax loopholes and increasing taxes on everybody might just lead to less tax revenue being brought in overall.
Isn't this, what was it called, the Laffer curve or something like that?
So, I think I know what you're referring to. It's basically...
The prediction never pans out because people essentially move their money.
They move their money to, say, government-backed securities that don't have as much taxes on them. Or, for instance, if you thought to yourself, I'm going to start a business that's going to make me lots of money. Hold up, it's all going to be taxed away from me. I'm not going to bother.
Yeah.
Lots of missed opportunities means lots of missed opportunities by the government to actually raise any tax money, which just means, in the end, more deficit spending.
This is a point that Daniel Hannan makes. Is that, look, it sounds counterintuitive, but actually lowering the taxes allows businesses, and I can speak firsthand as a business owner, if I had to pay less tax, I would be able to afford more business. I
know, it would be fantastic.
Yeah, it would be fantastic. And so the government is actually holding us back by taxing us. So if they tax us less, we'd end up being able to pay more in taxes.
Well, that's the funny thing as well, because less taxes for the business means more money, which means probably higher wages. Yeah. Higher wages that also get taxed less mean I get to go out and stimulate the economy a bit more as well.
No, that's exactly what it is. Like, I saw a thing where I saw a thing a while ago, it was ages ago, so it was something like 12% or something was the optimum amount of tax, because then it's, you get a reasonable amount from the government where people aren't like, I'm going to have to try and, escape the taxes. And it still gives you enough money to, as you say, stimulate the economy and spend loads of cash.
But, of course, more money for the government, less money for you. I hope you're enjoying the gradual decline of Western civilization, because I sure am.
Idiots in charge. That's what this is.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this premium article on how the Russian establishment views the Ukraine conflict, with a audio track for silver and gold tier members. If you want to find out what else we're putting out on the website, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.